I want to talk to you about something that I've been contemplating for a little while. And I want you to assume with me for a moment that you have a world class college athlete who played college football for a prominent institution. And that 21, 22-year-old young man is used to winning. In fact, the ones I'm thinking about, I think probably lost two games in 4 years of their career. They then get drafted by crappy NFL teams. And then they start to lose. And then they lose some more. And then you see their damn performance tank. What happens?
Well, I would say that that's person dependent. I don't think that always necessarily happens. I don't think it's a matter of reverse engineering it and assuming that that's the outcome. So it's all personal based. Some people, sort of become that, and others either don't stand for it or look to be traded or whatever it is, and others maybe even step up because it's an environment in which they're given an opening. So I don't think it's universal that way, but team sports provide obviously many more elements and many more variables than individual sports.
So I'm thinking about a couple of NFL teams who have been bad for a long time, and they continue to draft because of the draft order of football. These very talented kids from really great schools. I'm thinking about teams like the Giants and the Jets and the Redskins, and then these players show up. The teams continue to lose, and along with that, their performance doesn't. They're not carrying a team to victory. So when you say it's person dependent, I get it. But does the environment have that much effect on these kids because they're contractually bound to that team for a while?
Um, Once again, I think this is sort of Monday morning quarterbacking.
It is.
It's
It
sort of
is,
it's
and
sort
it's
of a it's sort of
intriguing.
a well, I don't know. I think it's more intriguing to actually talk to a person and figure out what's really happening, as opposed to saying, well, naturally, if he goes to a losing team, he's going to lose, and sort of take that and run with it. I think it's much more intriguing to figure out what is really going on inside of a person than it is to make, so-called these judgments and these universal sort of rules.
So let me reframe the question this way. If you are working with somebody who is a winner in all aspects of life, right, and he or she goes to a losing environment that is just known, whether it's in sports or business, how do you help that person not let the environment pollute her mind?
Well, it depends what they want. Everyone does, you know, everyone is predisposed to doing and pursuing that which is their greatest desire. So you don't desire in order to act, your actions determine your desires. So it's a multifactorial thing. It really depends upon what the person really wants, and I think it's short-sighted simply to say, well, that person's in a losing environment and they want to win. It's deeper than that.
So, like, give me an example of it being deeper than that. If I'm a young man, and I haven't lost but 2 or 3 games in 4 or 5 years, and probably very little in high school, and then in my first NFL season, I'm gonna be part of a team that's gonna lose 15 games.
Well, I think that when someone first comes into, the major leagues, so to speak, and the professional side of things, it isn't just about winning. I mean, there's a there's a big learning curve. There's a lot of things that person's trying to get used to and acclimated to, and so in any environment, a person naturally finds his or her own niche and his or her own place, and it's always related to self-image. And when that person settles down in that environment, then he will naturally, when all the dust settles, he will find out for himself if that's something that he can, environment in which he can live, in which he can flourish, or which he actually succumbs to. And that isn't necessarily a conscious decision. It really is based upon the person's DNA and what it is that he truly wants. So I don't think it's as black and white as the way that you're posing it.
If one of those kids were one of your boys, and part of the evolution of playing a team sport, not that golf isn't a team sport, maybe in college it is, and they go in one of these, whether it's NFL or NHL or Major League Baseball or something, and they go into an environment that going in, these teams have lost perpetually.
I don't think it's about winning and losing. I think that on some level, everything is an individual sport. I think it's team from the outside, but on the inside and inside the human being, it's individual. So a person could be on a losing team, but that person could excel. And by excelling as an individual on that losing team, even if by individual, that also means that the way that he passes and the way that he makes other players in the team better, those are still individual skills and traits. Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, he increases his brand. So I don't think it's just about raising the trophy. I would say that the team obfuscates and complicates everything. I think really, at the end of the day, everything is an individual sport.
Well, this is a topic that fascinates me, and that's why I wanted to, when I heard a lot of these kids over the weekend, knowing you and I were going to connect, talk about, hey, I'm not used to losing. I'm not used to losing. I'm not used to losing. Now you kind of hit the nail on the head.
That's a very immature and short-sighted view.
And they are immature.
And it really, but then again, they've been taught to be immature. I think that if you look at every facet of society, particularly in the world of sports, the depth of things and the nuance of things, just like anywhere else, it's never really examined. It isn't just about the X's and the O's. It isn't just about the winning and the losing. It is about winning and losing for the coaches. It is about winning and losing for the management, because at the end of the day, what is a professional sports team? It's a hot dog sale. At the end of the day, it's what it is. So it's not about it's an entertainment. So while the player doesn't view it as that, nor should he, a player, that's his livelihood, that's his art, that's his craft, and that's very appropriate to look at it that way. But for the people at the top, it's bottom line. So I don't think that the way that they look at it, I think it would be a mistake for the players to look at it the same way that management looks at it.
So perfectly then to one of your signature insights that I think people who've listened to our conversations get, which is the whole idea and the notion of giving yourself permission to be great. Ironically, that's one of the areas that I get the most questions or the most ahas from people from. So when you have somebody who's 22, 23, 24, whatever, who truly feels like he or she can carry a team on their shoulders and can take a losing organization and turn them into a winning organization, what does that DNA look like? Like, what do you look for in somebody where you say, hey, that person can make a real difference?
Well, I guess a quiet sort of confidence, it's all the regular things, right? It's someone who doesn't follow the crowd, someone who isn't really there for the socialization, someone who is really focused on what they really want. It's those kind of things.
So when you talk about this idea of permission, what does it take for somebody to be truthful about, you know what, I'm done with the past. I truly want to give myself permission to be the best in the world at what I do. When you're talking with somebody, do you feel that that's sincere?
Well, I would say the question is the opposite. The question is, what is it that's preventing you?
What is it that's preventing me?
Yes. And not only what is it that's preventing you, more specifically, what is it that's always prevented you from being world class?
My mind.
That's a nothing answer. That can be said about anything. Specifically, it is not about looking for what it is that one needs. It's much more about looking at the barriers.
Okay,
So
take me through that.
you know very well inside of you right now. If I held a gun to your head, I'm not going to play your game. I'm not going to buy whatever you say. Okay, that's your mind. So when you give the answer, my mind, that's your mind saying my mind, so that we don't have to go any further, and I can give you some 5-step plan that'll fix everything. Okay, that's what I'm not going to fall for. What I am saying to you is right now, as we sit here right now, you know exactly the things that are preventing you, and you don't want to look at those things. In order to shove those things under the carpet, you want me to give you a camouflage. And that camouflage that you're asking from me is a prescription, because you are simply looking for anything and everything that you can occupy yourself with that will prevent you from having to look at the barriers.
So let me throw out some of the barriers, right? And help me think through it. Fear.
Too general. Right now, what you're doing is fishing. Okay? So right now, you're tossing me a bone in order to make me think that you are, in fact, speaking the truth and looking at your barriers, so that I will succumb and say, okay, that's good enough. Now I will give you the prescription that you seek.
So let's talk about fear of failure.
I don't think it's fear of failure. I would say it's more maybe fear of success.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
So, and that goes back to self-image.
Which is what you wrote about this week or 2 weeks ago or whenever, and I have some questions about that, but yes.
A person always defaults to his defaults. So a person always becomes what he believes himself to be. So you can behavior modify whatever you want, right? You can bring the whole, coaching gang and the self-improvement fanatics, right? And the raw motivational speakers, and you can hire a big old hall and you can just fill them with all this motivation. And at the end of the day, when they walk out of that hall, they will default by the time they walk to their car.
And that's why I'm asking.
So what I'm saying to you is, what you will become is who you believe yourself to be. What you will become is what you cannot stop yourself from becoming. What you will achieve are the things that you cannot help but achieve. What you will accomplish are the things that you cannot live without accomplishing. So at the end of the day, your story, your fate, your destiny, where you will go, it's already been written. And it's been written by who you believe yourself to be. So you acting it out is just a formality. There's no amount of behavior modification or raw that I can fill you with to become the world's greatest if your self-image and your DNA is not that of someone who must be great, who must be the greatest in the world, who, when I put a GoPro on, it follows him around the house every single day, that I become convinced by all the things that he does that are very convincing to anyone who watches the video footage that this person is completely obsessed by becoming that. So everything in your life is already written, and you don't have to look at that from the standpoint of fate, but from the standpoint of who you are on the inside. That is who you will become.
So what's the process then? So one of the things that you talk about in the discourse that you write about self-image is that most of us are never enough in our own eyes.
No one is enough in their own eyes. When you view yourself as a personality, when you view yourself as this self called John or Joe, you cannot be enough. You can raw yourself into believing that, but you won't genuinely believe it.
So where does that deficiency come from then?
Well, the self can never be whole. You will always have deficiencies. You will always have insecurities. You will always have fears. A person who is conscious of his self, such as self-consciousness, is a person who will always have insecurities about that self. So a person is at his best when he isn't aware of himself. So when he is playing a sport or an instrument or whatever it is, for a brief period of time, when he loses his concept of self and he is completely lost in that art, he is at his best. And at that moment, he has no deficiencies. And the reason that he doesn't is because at that moment, he has no self. So you can't band-aid a self enough to make it whole. And this is why the self-improvement and the self-development and the spirituality and the motivation, that's why all of these multi-billion-dollar industries are all founded upon a completely false concept. Therefore, it's a house of cards.
It is. Do you personally have days where your mind is just a constant stream of negative thoughts?
Well, negative versus positive is irrelevant. If you.
But why is it irrelevant? Don't you feel there's some thoughts that are more negative than they are positive?
So when you go outside and you go to a landfill, is there some garbage that's more clean than other garbage?
Probably not.
No, there isn't muddy garbage there in human feces, and then other garbage which is relatively clean and like a nice, perfectly clean bottle that's empty.
Maybe.
Okay, that's the same thing with thoughts. So if you would never go to a landfill and compare cleanliness versus dirt, then it's the same thing with the thoughts. Human beings believe that the mind and the intellect are something to be proud of. And this false notion is what they're fed by society.
So you don't think that
it doesn't matter what I think. The only significance here is that you are convinced of the opposite, and that isn't right or wrong.
I'm really not convinced of the opposite, but that's why I asked the question. So maybe I should take the negative stream out of it and just say a constant stream of thoughts, maybe an abnormal amount. Yeah,
the mind is a barking dog.
Mm-hmm. When that dog doesn't stop barking during the course of an hour or 2 hours, like, what do you do?
Nothing. You're not going to stop the mind from barking. And if you try to, you'll be basically trying to bail water out of a sinking boat with a teacup for the rest of your life. Because the only reason that you're trying to stop the mind from barking is the reason why it's barking in the first place. Mm-hmm. Did you understand that?
I do. That's why I hesitated. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. What did you understand there?
I understood that the moment that I put my conscious effort to stopping whatever's going on in my mind, right? Whether it's negative or positive, that's the actual, that whole recognition and movement towards trying to change something is what's causing it, when I should just ignore it.
So why? Just move on. So no, well, you just totally destroyed it when you said just ignore it and move on, because that itself is an action, and that will lead you right back like a U-turn to the mind. Mm-hmm. So the only reason that someone wants to stop the mind from barking is because they wish to feel the pleasure of peace. The reason that the mind is barking in the first place is because they wish to fulfill the pleasure of desire. So the search for happiness and pleasure is the most fruitless search of a human life. And it is the single most critical reason why a human being lives in suffering.
Because we're searching for constantly trying to seek happiness.
Well, you don't even have to be constant, but yes. But you're right, it is constant. Happiness and pleasure, mm-hmm. Both the same.
Yep. And away from the other, the opposite.
Sure.
Right? The fear and all of that.
Yes. A chase for pleasure and an aversion for pain. And if you hear that and you think to yourself, the moment that you think to yourself that, yes, I must stop doing that, you're done, because you're doing it again. Because the only reason that you would even want to stop searching for pleasure and stop running from pain is because you want happiness. You want once again the same thing.
When you think about self, when you wrote about the beautiful discourse that you wrote about self-image, did you consider your own self-image at all when you were writing?
Oh, how do we know about the world? How do we know about any human being? We know it through ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So the person who examines himself to the utmost degree is the person who knows all human beings.
So can you give me a contrast between what Kapil Gupta's self-image was 10 years ago and perhaps what it is now?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of comparing self-images. I think it's much more what matures over time is seriousness and sincerity. And as we grow older, we begin to see the folly of things. Depending upon how one is wired, we begin to see the foolishness and the silliness of the things that happen in life, and moving through life, and all the events that happen in life, and how we think about things. And so as we begin to look into those things and see the foolishness of it, and to see the holes and the falsehoods of them, then we begin to, or at least I began to examine the nature of the self. So it wasn't about me having a better self. It was examining into the nature of what a human being really is, and what are the source of all problems. So it's much more a movement away from self in the direction of, this is going to come out the wrong way, but selflessness, but has nothing to do with what you believe to be selflessness, because there's nothing but self in selflessness in the traditional meaning of selflessness.
And are you at a point now where there is no self-image?
It's really, it's a fair question, but I think that for me even to answer it would be to fall for a trap, because if I was to say,
it isn't a trap.
No, it isn't. You aren't posing it as a trap, but it is a trap for me to walk into it, because if I say, yes, I have no self, that is a contradiction in terms. So let us just be sincere and honest and leave it at, I am devoted to examining the falsehoods of the self and to see the outer boundaries of those falsehoods in order to discover truth.
And then when that happens, is that when the dependency on others and the dependency on your team and society and all just you don't give a damn about it anymore?
I think when you begin to see through things, and you begin to see around corners, and you begin to see the falsehood in things that you used to believe were true, then the things that you see as false automatically begin to fall away. There is no added step of making them fall away. So there is no real detachment. It is that when you see that something is false, one automatically disengages, not by any conscious effort, but just because it's false. And the second that it's noted to be false and one deeply seeks truth, then the disengagement happens all by itself. So everything happens by itself. Anything that you must do by volition and an intentional effort and interference is false.
So you don't call the work that you're doing on yourself effort? Like
No,
you ask
no,
yourself?
absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's sort of like moving through a jungle, and you're not trying to build anything. You're simply looking at the jungle. You're simply trying to figure out how the jungle is arranged, and if these trees are real or not. And if you pass your hand through the trunk, does your hand pass through, or does it get caught on the trunk? So it really is an examination and exploration which is completely and utterly not prescriptive. It is not a conscious observing or an intentional, I will watch my thoughts. All those things are a complete moving towards prescription and moving away from truth. So absolutely not. I would not call it effort. I would not call it practice by any means.
Do you consciously sit down every day and...
No, I don't consciously do anything. It's just where I live. Like if you live in Los Angeles, do you consciously try to live in Los Angeles every day? It's just where you live. It's where you. It's your home. It's never not there. There's no. I will take time out from my schedule now to sit. There is no schedule. This is all that exists for me, and there's no reason. I mean, I even hesitate saying that because there's no reason to think that's great or anything. It's nothing. We are. I'm not a good person because I happen to be devoted to discovering the truth about life. That wasn't my choice.
But I know a whole lot of people who follow you who would like to discover that truth, who look at it as really hard work. Maybe that's the problem.
Well, that is the problem, but looking at that being the problem is also the problem, because as soon as you say that's the problem, then you're going to try to move away from that problem. And as soon as you do, you run into a wall.
So what's a better way to look at it?
Well, is to be genuine, is to understand that you will never go anywhere else but where you are. You want to be here, or you're standing here and you want to be over there. Well, the only way to get over there is by understanding where you first are. And human beings are not taught that. They are taught to run over there and to do this, and this to get over there. Well, the more they do this, and this, it just gets them to the this, and this. So wherever you go, you can only go from where you are.
Yeah, and I guess people have to really understand that so they can go there. I get asked a lot about your private discourses and the difference between what you share with the public and what you share privately. And the point is, are you approaching different topics with your private discourses, or are you approaching the same topics from a deeper perspective?
Well, the topics I write about in the private discourses, I publish the title and maybe even an excerpt sometimes on Twitter, so they're there for everyone to see. At least the title is, or the excerpt. But I don't, there's no, a constant exposure to truth for whoever we are, a constant exposure to truth or to untruth. Mm-hmm. That is what seeps into you. And so it really is about what you are exposed, taking that to another level. It is what you are exposed to inside yourself. So the sincerity within yourself, as for the search that you are on, that is the thing which speaks to you. And it's not good or bad. So you are constantly exposed to that search, whatever your search is. And that's what shapes you. That's where you live. So whatever I write about, it is a completely speaking in tongues, sort of, so-called flow state sort of writing of no mind, which comes about a topic which just comes through the page. There's no system to it.
And do you close the book and publish it, or do you go back and relook at some of the things that you've done?
No, in many ways, I'm not the one who writes it. It just gets written through my fingers somehow. Mm-hmm. And so when it's written, it goes out.
Is there a sense when you make a decision, whether it's a decision to publish something or whether it's a decision about your life or your business, when do you know you've made a really good decision?
That's a very good question. I don't think it's about having the decision be very good. I don't think that there is a right or wrong decision about anything. I think it really is, where do you want to go, and what is the motivation behind what you did in line with where you want to go. So if, for instance, you're genuinely seeking truth, then you will genuinely have your motivations be aligned with publishing that which comes from your bones, without being interfered with by, anything that is not truth. So not tainted by, for instance, if I was to go back and edit things to make them sound better, that would destroy what it is that I'm most seeking, which is to truly, genuinely allow the deepest things to come out, untouched and raw, so that frankly I may learn. So I think it's much more about the alignment of that, as opposed to the alignment of your decisions with right or wrong or good or bad.
So when you're working with leaders and they've got big decisions that they've got to make and they ask you for advice, do you take them in that direction to help them see that it's not about right or wrong? Because sometimes that could mean somebody's livelihood.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. It's always about that. It's always about taking them in the direction of truth, taking them in the direction of what is it that you really want, and what is it. It's never about drawing a line down the page and putting, positives and negatives, or benefits and losses, and it's never about that. A lot of times, most times, maybe even always, people have already decided without deciding. Something within them has already decided, and a lot of times they ask just for permission. They're not asking because they want to know what to do, and it's really it would be untruth for me to say that if someone's at a fork in the road and they ask me which way should I go, it's completely disingenuous for me to say go that way. It makes no sense. That isn't a genuine decision. We are in many ways chosen. We don't really choose.
Yeah, I totally believe that, but I do that sometimes with you. Even in these conversations, I do that. I probably have a sense of one way or the other, but it is gratifying if you get validation. How about I leave it like that? What is that telling you about somebody who tells you, hey, your validation means something to me?
That means that the person is looking for happiness and ego and self-image.
And does it say anything about
what does your validation have anything to do with anything? That's just an ego boost.
It's validation because you're somebody that I trust. You're somebody that I respect.
Okay, let's say that you made a decision to do X, and then you asked me, what do you think? And I said, yes, that was a great decision. Mm-hmm. So what? What does that buy you? Aside from a very short blip on the screen of good feeling, of satisfaction, or whatever it is, that's going to be gone by dinner time. So everything is irrelevant. Do you understand? See, nothing means anything. So what that you feel good? That has no relevance. And the reason that it has no relevance at all is because it's like wind passing in the night. It doesn't last. It doesn't stick around. So at the end of the day, it's yet another clever example of seeking pleasure, reinforcing self-image. So all things in a human life come back down to that. It's just like in business. Everything sooner or later returns to money.
True.
And the same thing with human beings. Everything sooner or later returns to happiness and self-image.
Have you ever consulted anybody when you were faced with a really tough decision? A friend, family member?
Here's my honest answer to you. In times past, I have. And as I was doing it, I knew it was for entertainment purposes only.
So I assume now you don't.
If the more critical the decision, the less reason there is to consult someone, because that's when it needs to be the most pure. The decision that doesn't mean anything, you can consult all you want because it doesn't matter. So once again, the truth, everything is opposite.
Yeah, of course. Everybody who listens to you knows that now. you said something this thing about self-image, because you've brought it up here a couple of times, that a man doesn't improve himself, he only improves his self-image. Is that the constant race that you see a lot of the people in the world doing? Is everybody trying to is everything about that nowadays?
Well, how can it not be? If this is all that one knows, how could it be about anything else?
So is the truth to be immune from that?
No, the truth lies in desiring to know the truth, and that can't be a recommendation. Everything, for good or for bad, it just goes back to DNA. It just does. And it's not genetic DNA. It's just how someone is wired. Everything always goes back to DNA. A person who is a chaser and is always seeking happiness and has no interest in really diving deep into find the core of the issue, and that has revealed itself in all domains of his life, which it always does. Who you are always reveals itself. That person is going to die like that. He just is. There's nothing that can be done. Your fate is sealed by your DNA. Now, and even if you come to the point where you have an epiphany or a realization that you truly want to walk the path of truth and you never have before, that also is DNA. The DNA and the seed of that DNA of seeking the truth or having the epiphany, even that existed. You are not going to change who you are. And self-improvement is a complete sham.
I'm with you on that. But when you talk about you're not going to improve who you are or change who you are.
Yes, that is not a message. That is not a message that anyone wants to hear. And quite frankly, I'm not here to please anyone. You don't need, the last person you should believe is me. Look at the evidence. Look at the obituaries. It happens every single day. It's been happening for millennia. You don't need to look at me and ask me what the weather is when you can open the window and look outside.
So why is there a reason to live if I know that I'm not going to be able to change myself?
That's a question that you should be asking yourself. But you have to have the DNA to even ask yourself that question. Right now, you aren't asking that question. You're asking it out of a sense of outrage. It isn't real.
No, it really isn't. It's out of a sense of respect, I think.
When a person who has the DNA will look in his mirror, and he will not ask that question out of outrage. He'll ask that question sincerely. It is precisely that person who actually will seek truth, not because he should, but because he can't help it. And if you examine his life, and if you examine his schooling years, and if you examine previous jobs that he's had, you will always see seeds of that. You will never see some wholesale, brand new, spontaneous personality. The seeds of who someone is have always been there. Like if you look at a writer, the person's always been a writer. Even when they were small, they used to just write on the back of gum wrappers. Who you are has always been there. I'm like I said, I'm not here to ease the pain. I have no interest. I don't even want to talk to anybody. Most of what I write isn't for anyone, to be honest with you. Quite frankly, I don't know why anybody at all would read what I write. There's no positivity or negativity, or actually, you might assume it's negative if you buy the positive and negative.
Right?
But it doesn't. But it doesn't matter that it's truth. The only person who would be interested in the truth is the one who is genuinely seeking it. The person who isn't interested in truth, he is seeking positivity and happiness, and that is almost everyone. So I'm not sure why I have more than one follower on Twitter. It makes no sense to me. And the followers go up. There's no one who's more shocked than I am. Why are you reading what I'm writing? It is Armageddon almost, right? It's telling you that you are going to be the way you are forever. You're never going to get better. Self-improvement is a scam. you're going to die. Why would you listen to that? Right? Why wouldn't you put on a motivational speaker or put on nice, Dalai Lama and listen to happiness and chanting and quite frankly, most do. So when you ask me this question, why are we even here? What's the point of even living? Well, what do you want me to say? It is what it is. So either you ask that question out of sincerity because you're the DNA to do so, and you ask yourself, or if you ask me, I'm just going to respond with silence. What do you want me to say?
Again, the people who do follow you, and I know that I speak for the ones that I know, not only appreciate what you say, but I think the most important thing is it challenges the way they look at the world. It challenges the way they look at themselves. Whether they choose to seek truth or have the DNA to seek truth or not, that's for them to decide. But that's why at least the core group of people that I talk to consistently about you and what you do in your work, that's kind of the thing that comes up. So let me look at it from this perspective. I understand the DNA. Let's take a group of kids who were from however way we want to frame it, underprivileged. They don't have access to this stuff. Yet somebody wants to give them a chance and wants to expose them that, hey, you're young, you're talented, whether or not you have the DNA. Here's an approach to see the world. Look at the world from truth. Don't look at the world from all the things that you hear. Would you look at something like that and a group of kids like that, for example, as having the remotest of possibilities to change?
Yes.
To seek truth?
Well, I don't think it would be a change. I think it would be there. You would be pouring water on some seeds that might already exist.
Okay.
So the answer to your question is absolutely.
Okay. How should I start to feed them? Because I have a group like that. How should I start to water those seeds?
You're not going to be able to do it.
Can we expose them to some of the work that you do in little tiny glimpses, or have them? I have feed them some of the discourses, and some of them look at me and say, "Hey, wow, this is amazing, but feed me. What do I do next?"
So the more serious that someone is,
keep in mind they're kids. I think they're all under 17 or 16 or something like that.
The more serious that someone is in guiding someone, the less they will preach to them. The more serious someone is, the less they will answer their questions. Because all questions will come in the form of prescription, because everyone is brainwashed by society into asking for prescriptions. So if someone asks me questions, even in the private consultation, I don't answer a lot of times. I just remain silent because there's nothing I can say. I'm not going to buy into the question. If I say yes, then that'll take you down this road. If I say no, it'll take you down that road. And both roads will lead to the same hell. So the only answer is silence.
Is there a way for somebody to frame a question where you don't go that path? Or is there a way that...
No, because now you're talking about trickery, right? Now you're talking about, is there a way to manufacture a question?
No, I'm not.
So what I'm saying is, a genuine question when you hear it. And so as for, helping your group of kids, I will honestly say that the watering of the seeds will come through exposure to truth without trying to teach them, to preach them, or to answer their questions. Because people who read my work, it isn't about me. So there's some form of alchemy that happens between the words and with whatever happens to lie inside of them. So it's between those two elements. And when that happens, it happens. There's nothing for me to say, right? So it is about an exposure to the type of water that they might have the seeds for.
All right. So let me leave that one there, and let me just ask you two more quick things. Are there any questions in particular that you're contemplating right now and that you're writing about that perhaps you haven't published?
There's so much stuff. I don't know where to begin. I mean, I don't know. Was
there one this week that
No, it's never like that. It's never like that. It's never a menu. Everything is spontaneous. So whatever comes from the private discourse, it just spontaneously arose. It wasn't something that I planned to do. The questions are whatever they are, they're always relating to the truth. What is the truth about this situation? What is the truth about arriving at this? What is, it's always about an arrival. It's always about getting to the complete indivisible nucleus of the cell.
So when a question like that arises, and you don't have to give me the question, do you just start to write, or do you sit on it?
I write when things arise, and there's a desire to explore it, and the writing is the exploration, and the desire to explore opens the gates, and the words come.
And then once that's done, do you revisit a similar exploration, or once you do it once, that's it?
No, there's no rules. It's whatever arises.
Last question. You wrote a discourse about nothing. What does the word nothing mean to you? Do you even remember the discourse?
Definitions don't go anywhere. I vaguely remember. I think it was called a discourse about nothing.
About nothing. Yes.
I have no idea what it was about. I have no clue. I don't remember anything about the discourse, but I do remember the title.
It had something to do with us posting photos on Twitter and Instagram, and we're selling ourselves and all of that, and that to you is nothing. But as I read it, I started to think, is there something to the word nothing to you?
I would say that it's about seeing, once again, not forcing it upon yourself, but it's genuinely about seeing the emptiness of all things, and that nothing has any significance. The ultimate truth, which will benefit no human being except maybe one, and they probably aren't even listening to this podcast. The ultimate truth is that there is nothing. There is no greater truth than that, and no intellect in the world.
So rules don't matter.
Will ever be able to decipher that. No, nothing matters. No, there's nothing. Everything operates according to its own rhythm. Everything operates according to its own cause and effect. And any attempt to interrupt that rhythm, and any attempt to modify the effect that was naturally occurring by a particular cause, is a road to suffering, pain, anxiety, and failure. So it is about understanding things, and it is about seeing what the rhythms are and what the patterns are, instead of, a leaf rides on the surface of the river, and in doing so, it assumes the power of the river. See, that's intelligence. Mm-hmm. That's wisdom more than intelligence, and that's nature following its rhythms. So it isn't about, human beings have this hammer and nail and this brute force mentality, whereas wisdom is much more along the lines of a willow tree. It's really going with the wind, and it's really harnessing the wind as opposed to fighting it. I think that type of sensibility is one that arrives to truth.
And do you feel it when, if that one person, they're probably not listening to this podcast, if that one person is around you, do you feel that do you feel that sense of authenticity and sincerity when they're
Yes.
getting to that point?
Well, you don't have to get to that point. You can tell one's DNA by the things that they say. It's very, very, very rare to encounter a person with rare DNA. And I don't mean just that a person is really good at golf or very good at, there's many of those. But I'm talking about a person who is genuinely a rarity with regard to how he dissects things, how he views things, being completely opposite of the way everyone else does it. It's very rare to run into that. And when you do, it's exhilarating, because you have found a unicorn.
Have you met anybody lately who kind of had that impact on you?
No, I haven't. But what oftentimes happens is that someone will write something and it will be promising that they might be that type of individual, and then a few paragraphs later, they'll sadly deflate. And if only they could have kept going, so to speak. If only it's sort of like reading a person who writes a book, and they write something, and you say, "Oh wow, this person may be going along the lines of truth," and then within a page, they sell their soul within a page. Well, here's the 5-step plan. I was just waiting for it. Right? As soon as you did that, you just fell, the roof caved in, the floor fell out, and everything went to hell. You were doing so well, right? You were showing such promise. You could have been the one. But then you sold out. You showed your true colors. And now you have removed yourself from as a candidate of the rare one. The people who tell the truth, the people who are like some of these ancient, very ancient, like Zen masters, who couldn't give 2 cents whether you understood, didn't understand, couldn't care less. They just spoke the truth. And that is something that quite frankly, it is beautiful. It would be to see someone like that and encounter them, because I could talk to them day and night.
I know you can.
That kind of person, but everyone's institutionalized by society, Mo.
And when you read, do you still read things from people like that?
I really don't read much anymore, but if I do pick up a book, yes, it is along the lines of some of those rare writings of titles of the title of a book, which would almost sounds absurd. But those are the kind of things that if I am to read that I would pick up. But reading for me is nothing reveals the truth. Believe me, if someone talked about the direct truth about things and didn't prescribe, I would read all their books. Believe me, I would. I would long for such things, but it just doesn't. You're just, I live in the wrong era, I guess.
Well, yeah, for sure. Right? You live in a different era. How about we leave it like that? Right? You live in a different era.
Well, the things that I'm interested in, are so completely, way out there and so anti everything. This is like I look outside the window and I see this is just this plastic society in which I'm just been placed here in this purgatory, and it's like there's no sense of belonging to this. The music that I hear and the words that are spoken and the culture of sports and business and life and the neon lights and the news and the televisions and the radio. I don't listen to the television. I don't listen to the radio. I live this monk-like existence in like a hermit, staying away from everything. It's almost like waterboarding in a way. You're placed into an environment to which you do not fundamentally and intrinsically belong.
But you still have to water the seeds that are your 2 young boys, because I know they're your pride and joy, right? Like, do you?
Those things those seeds get watered
by them just observing you?
I don't think it's about them observing anything. I'd say those seeds get watered when you yourself are genuinely and non-prescriptively on a search for truth about you and your own life. And if anything's going to get watered, it's going to get watered through sincerity and genuineness. It's not going to get watered through prescriptions and teaching and advice and all of these things.
You never ever